The Fed15 podcast is presented by Serving Those Who Serve, a financial planning practice serving federal government employees and retirees all over the country. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be taken as financial advice. All listeners should consult their personal advisors before taking any action. The opinions expressed by our hosts are their own and do not reflect the views, policies, or position of either Raymond James or Serving Those Who Serve. Securities are offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc. Serving Those Who Serve is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services, Inc.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Fed15 podcast, presented by Serving Those Who Serve. Each week, we'll discuss the latest news and info that feds need to know in 15 minutes or less. So whether you are a seasoned federal employee or whether you're just starting out in your career, Fed15 has got you covered. So grab your coffee, kick back, and we'll tell you what you need to know but might have missed in the federal space this week. I know there is a ton of stuff going on from day to day in the federal space, and we want to make sure that we're keeping everybody up to date and really highlighting the stuff that is particularly relevant for federal government employees and retirees. I am your host, Katelyn Murray, and I have to say I this week instead of we are your hosts because Dan Sipe has run off and left me. No, in all seriousness, he is enjoying some well-earned time away from the office with his lovely bride of 40 years, Miss Mary. And I have had the pleasure of meeting Miss Mary myself. She is an incomparable, delightful, and vivacious woman. And, you know, we wish them all the best. Happy 40th anniversary, Dan and Miss Mary. So we have quite a lot to cover on the podcast this week. We have two bombshell articles. These were very big pieces that we released on our website, big topics. So Dan picked a great week to skip out on me. We are going to talk about the Social Security Fairness Act, which has it was kind of this massive thing that then was overshadowed by a lot of the recent developments with executive orders and cutbacks in the federal government. And I want to make sure that we are highlighting that appropriately for our CSRS and CSRS Offset folks who are primarily going to be impacted there. And then a little bit later, we are going to talk about life after RIF, and particularly the RPL, the Reemployment Priority List. So before we get there, let's take a look at this Social Security Fairness Act. So I am assuming that by this point, probably everyone who has been impacted by this has at least heard about it, but you may not be clear on the specifics because here's the thing. The Social Security Fairness Act signed into law on January 5th repealed two very technical, very confusing elements of law. That particularly impact, as I said, CSRS and CSRS offset employees. So one is the Windfall Elimination Provision, the WEP, and one is the GPO, the Government Pension Offset. And essentially, these two kind of clauses or provisions had the effect of reducing the amount of Social Security benefit, in some case eliminating the Social Security benefit that folks could receive if they were receiving a government pension. So the impact, obviously, of repealing those two things is a good thing. It's a net positive for CSRS and CSRS offset employees. It means that you could be entitled to some Social Security benefits, whereas before either maybe you weren't getting any Social Security benefits or perhaps you weren't getting as much as you may be now that this has been repealed. And the impact on Social Security benefits is pretty significant for folks who were affected by the Windfall Elimination Provision. There's an average increase now that that's been repealed of about $360 per month in their Social Security benefits. And for the government pension offset, which primarily impacted spouses and widows and widowers of federal government employees under CSRS or CSRS offset, for spouses, the average increase for Social Security benefits was about $700 per month. And for survivors, so widows and widowers of government employees impacted by GPO, the average Social Security increase was about $1,190 per month. And again, these are all monthly numbers. They are also pre-tax numbers, important to mention that. But as you can see, not an insignificant amount of income to be looking at, coming in now that maybe you didn't previously have before. So the timetable for implementation here, changes are expected to begin in 2025, and there is a retroactive payment. The way the law was written, they ended WEP and GPO as of December 31st of 2023. So there is a retroactive payment for what you didn't get in 2024 due to the WEP and the GPO reductions. And then also going forward, the benefit is adjusted. So if you are already receiving benefits, you need to make sure your mailing address and your direct deposit info are current on the Social Security website. No need to reapply for benefits. The Social Security Administration is going to go ahead and adjust those payments automatically. So you don't really need to do anything. Just sit back and kind of monitor. And when you see that bump up, you'll know why that happened. If you have not filed for Social Security benefits because as a CSRS or CSRS offset employee, you were told that you could not get Social Security, it's going to be important for you to go ahead and file online at ssa.gov/apply. And you can also schedule an appointment at your local Social Security office and bring in the documents that they require in order to file. Those documents are your birth certificate, your Social Security card, military service papers if you've got them, W-2 forms or tax returns, a marriage certificate if that's applicable to your situation, a divorce decree if that is applicable to your situation. But if you have not filed for Social Security benefits as a CSRS or CSRS offset employee, or as the spouse or survivor of a CSRS or CSRS offset employee, you're going to want to make sure that you go ahead and file for Social Security. There is no penalty. Let me be clear. There is no penalty for applying for Social Security benefits. If you are not eligible, they will simply tell you you are not eligible. But I definitely suggest that you go ahead and apply just to see, if you're able to get a benefit now that the Social Security Fairness Act has been repealed. And of course, this is, dovetailing with the Social Security strategy that you already have set up, hopefully through talking with a professional. So for more information on this, I highly recommend visiting a couple things. One, this article has a really great flow chart for determining your possible eligibility for this. So highly, highly recommend going to stwserve.com. And in the search bar, you can just search Social Security Fairness Act. And that will pull up this article, which has the flow chart for you to kind of go through the details of confirming eligibility, because it's a little bit hairy. WEP and GPO are definitely not the simplest pieces of legislation impacting federal government benefits. But also, do visit the Social Security Administration website at ssa.gov. That's where you can file for benefits, but they have a lot of information on their website with this as well. And they also have a very interesting WEP screening tool to help you kind of figure out what the impact to you will be. So definitely check that out. Highly recommend looking into that. Again, if you're CSRS or CSRS offset. If you are FERS, this does not apply to you because WEP and GPO did not apply to you. Excellent. All right. Well, getting into our second topic here. So Dan actually wrote this article called Life After Reduction in Force, Knowing the Rules. And it really centers on a piece of the RIF protocol that is called the Reemployment Priority List. Now, the Reemployment Priority List, we'll call it RPL for short, is a list that is maintained by federal agencies to provide reemployment priority to competitive service employees that are separated by a RIF or compensable injury. Okay. And the goal of this, the purpose of this RPL, why it exists, is to ensure that eligible employees have a pathway to return to federal service after being separated by a RIF. So I want to be clear. What this refers to is a reduction in force, a RIF. It does not necessarily relate to fork in the road offer, deferred resignation offer, VERA. What this is specifically RIF protocol. We want to make sure that you guys know your rights if a RIF is offered to you. So, eligibility for this Reemployment Priority List. Career and career conditional competitive service employees affected by a RIF are eligible for this if they meet certain criteria. First thing is you've got to have a performance rating above unacceptable. The second thing is you've got to be in tenure group 1 or 2. So your career employees or your career conditional, right? Tenure group 1, just as a refresher, are permanent employees who are eligible for the Reemployment Priority List for up to 2 years. And tenure group 2 are those career conditional employees who are eligible for the RPL for only 1 year. So the tenure groups are sort of tiers. Those permanent employees, permanent career employees can stay on that Reemployment Priority List for 2 years, whereas the career conditional folks can only stay on there for 1 year. And then there is a subgroup there, the Veterans Preference Group. Veterans with a service-connected disability of 30% or more are kind of given some priority there. It's broken out into tiers. So there's veterans with disabilities for 30% or more is subgroup 1. Subgroup 2 is veterans eligible for first preference, but not in the disabled subgroup. And then subgroup 3 is employees with no veteran preference. So that's basically who this applies to. All right, so there's a process for entering the RPL. You do have to submit an application to your agency in order to indicate your interest in that. And the agency has to submit that application within 10 calendar days to register on the department's RPL. Now, employees have to submit that application within 30 calendar days after your RIF separation date in order to maintain your eligibility for the RPL. So if you are separated from service due to a RIF, one thing that needs to happen within the next month from your separation date is getting that application in if being on the RPL is a priority for you. Now, there are some limitations. Employees are only entitled to consideration for positions that meet specific conditions. So the potential new position that you could be hired back for has to be the same or a lower grade as your previous position. It has to have no greater promotion potential, and it has to be basically the same type of work schedule. So a similar type position. You can be considered for positions that you previously held on a non-temporary basis that may have been downgraded during a RIF as well. And then just a couple more qualification requirements here. You do need to meet OPM qualification standards, including educational and selective placement factors for the new position. You do have to be physically able to perform the job duties for that new position. But what is really important to acknowledge, so first of all, knowing that this type of program exists and knowing what the eligibility is. However, what I really want to kind of highlight is you can kind of screw up your eligibility for an RPL unknowingly, okay? So the way your RPL eligibility can end, let's say you put your application in, you're on the list, they offer you a position. If you decline that offer of assignment that's offered at the same grade, not the lower grades, but if they make you an offer of a position that's at the same position that you were at and you decline that offer, your RPL eligibility ends and you are removed from the list. If you resign, retire, or separate from your agency, RPL eligibility ends, as opposed to being removed by a RIF. Requesting removal from the RPL, you can say, hey, take my name off the list. I'm good. If you accept a career or career conditional position outside of RPL protocols, then obviously they would take you off that list. And then if your separation date on the RPL expires, kind of how we were talking about with tenure group 1 and 2, right? Tenure group 1, those permanent employees can stay on for 2 years. Tenure group 2, career conditional, can only stay on for 1 year. Once that kind of deadline expires, then you are automatically removed from the RPL. So again, this applies specifically in the condition of a RIF, but I want to be clear that we are hoping to kind of educate you guys in advance so that as the situation is evolving, it feels like things are happening so fast. As the situation is evolving, you have the information at your fingertips to make the best decision for yourself and to keep your options open. So RPL, really important, impactful article there that my colleague Dan Sipe has written. I highly recommend checking it out on the Serving Those Who Serve website. That's STWServe.com. If you type in Reemployment Priority List on the search bar, it will take you right to that article, and you can dig a little deeper. Well, that is all the time that I have with you today, folks, but I promise that we will be back next week, hopefully with Dan, to bring you all the latest updates that you need to make informed decisions about your career and your financial well-being as a Fed. Now, our analytics does show us that 78%, I'm being a little too generous. 78% of folks who are watching our videos are not subscribed. So please, please, please subscribe to this podcast on our YouTube channel or on Spotify so that you never miss an episode. And please remember to share it with your friends and colleagues. I know this is a really difficult time to be a Fed. Trust me when I say that it's a difficult time to even be in the federal space. But information's power, knowledge is power. We are trying at Serving Those Who Serve to do our very best to have people making good decisions based off of facts and not moving out of fear. If you have had a conversation with someone who is worried about what's going on in the federal space, who is worried about their career longevity, who's worried about their financial planning, please, please, please send them an episode of this podcast. Let them know about Serving Those Who Serve. We've got a ton of free webinars. We've got some great ones coming up here shortly. We have the tax planning. I want to make sure that I have the date for you guys. I know it's tax season on top of everything else that's going on. So we have a tax planning for Feds webinar coming up on March 11th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we also have a Social Security webinar coming up on, when's that one? March 12th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. So if you are affected by the Social Security Fairness Act, it might be a good idea to come to that Social Security webinar. These webinars are totally complimentary. We do them for educational purposes. Like I said, we are a purpose-driven firm, and we want our Feds to be making good decisions based on correct information. So please do consider coming out for those webinars. You can register on our website at STWServe.com. Or if you prefer a one-on-one approach, you want to do some more detailed planning that involves contextual, your full financial context and not just benefits education, you can reach out to our team directly for a financial planning consultation at meetings at STWServe.com. And I thank you so much for hanging out with me today while I'm by my lonesome. Thank you for listening to the Fed15. I'm Katelyn Murray, and I will see you next week. Take care.